some time. I'm
Wow.
pretty bad about it. It's intimidating, I think.
That's understandable. So now that we're live, we're learning that Eddy is actually scared of LinkedIn.
Yep.
And that'll be the topic of today's show.
Hey now.
You're an all-star. You're a LinkedIn all-star, baby. Get your game on, go play.
It's true.
What up, John, in the chat? How you doing? He is still wanting us to change the name of the show to Mo-Show. So, you know, I think we can get a petition going for that, make that happen.
We got a petition.
But what's up, y'all? We're chatting with Eddy from Hobbs. If you
Hey.
don't know what Hobbs is, where are you at? Is my
Where
question.
are you at? The wonderful creative director.
Hobbs is in
Newport
Detroit.
Jones from the U.S. government. It's Eddy.
I am in Detroit, lovely Michigan. It's nice here. I like it. I made the move from New York a few years ago, like just before the world came to a halt. So I've enjoyed the space. Breathing out here is nice. I like it.
Fantastic.
But yeah.
That was fantastic.
Those all would have made amazing T-shirts for like the Detroit Department of Tourism or something. Yeah, it's nice here. I like it.
I like
Yeah. Did I sell you on it? Come on
I'm
out.
sold. I'm ready. Let's all move to Detroit.
it is tomorrow.
Oh, really? That quick? Okay. Well, we'll move
Yeah,
the
man.
studio out there. That works.
I'm a fast walker. What can I say?
You guys have like a back office that we can work out of, right, or something? Is that
Yeah,
work?
yeah. There's every corner has a back office. There's like so much. I think that's what's interesting about it here is like a lot. Like there's just people are doing things because there's space available.
Yeah.
So lots of new pop-ups and people just start interesting businesses. So I don't know. It could feel a bit Wild Westy, but it's kind of nice too.
That's fair.
Now you're talking Austin's language. Wild
Yeah.
West.
There you go.
Y'all,
Oh yeah.
partner. John says, I need to know who made the prints over Eddy's left and right shoulder.
Oh, great question. So this one is Simon Apple. I think he's in Sweden now. He's either Swedish or Norwegian. I forget, but he's amazing. Beautiful work. He's actually a 3D artist, but makes these gorgeous prints. And then the other one I got at a local print shop here, and I put it there because ever since we started doing all these remote calls, I found myself staring at people's like backdrops, and so I was like, someone does it to me, I want them to have to play a game. So I put a little eye test.
Test their
Back there.
eyesight. You can
Yes.
just, just like on the fly. Just
Just a little Easter egg in case you're like snooping around in here.
That's funny. Oh,
Moving.
I love that. What up, Hustle Motion? JJ Motion Studio. Glad to see you. JJ Motion Studio says, hey, Eddy. So.
Hey, what's up? Is it Joey Judkins?
I think
maybe.
so. I think so.
Yeah, I know him. He's a good friend. He came up to Detroit last year. It was a good time.
Oh my god.
Joey, I'm going to need your Detroit review in the chat to see if Eddy is lying to all of us or not.
No, it's all real.
Detroit's real.
Wow. Noah, you're the question guardian. Do you have our list of talking points? And in the meantime, while we're chatting, feel free to have your questions for Eddy all popping up in the chat, and we'll get to them. Don't you worry. And we'll get to our crits and recs, of course.
That's right. All right. Well, as the resident guardian of questions, I'd love to just start us off with an easy one. We asked this about everyone. How did you get into motion design / where you are today? What's that all about?
Yeah, I wonder what the general answer to this is, because in my experience, most people that have gotten into it did not know about it prior and kind of stumbled into it after a few things. So I know for me, being a kid, like growing up, I had a knack for like art classes and all that thing. But I thought I wanted to be like a comic artist. And I remember starting to do that and like getting into characters. And very specifically, I remember this one time drawing this one character, and she was looking kind of dumb. And I thought it was funny. And she kind of had her like finger and thumb, like this kind of thing. like it's like the shape of an L on our forehead. I was like, this is cool. And then I showed it to a friend, and they thought like it didn't even get it. Like I guess I thought you have to be really funny to do that too, and I forgot that part. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not that funny, but I can draw. And so at the time, I was really interested in engineering too. And so I was like, well, what's the middle ground? And so I came upon like just like drafting portfolios and like industrial design portfolios. I was like, oh, this is sweet. Cause it had like both things. It was like technically interesting, problem solving, and also like there was a creative element. So I went to school for industrial design and eventually came upon the motion design club. And I was just so blown away by like how it was like like they just combined everything into one major. They're like vis effects, animation, graphic design, like all this stuff. And I was like, whoa, that's so. It was so unencumbered by any constraints. Like you could literally make anything and call it motion design. I was like, well, that's sweet. Because at the time I was like thinking a lot about like, oh, like well, materials and like my skills in the workshop and like the world of industrial design, which I love dearly, just was so structured at the time. And I think I was like, I want the blank canvas. Like I don't want to know what I'm doing and be okay. Like it doesn't have to be so justified. And so I went for it. And so I did the motion design program at SCAD, which was great. And then moved to New York shortly after on an internship, and then was there for about 5 years. And then I had a great time. It was crazy. It was fun. It was a good time. I think I was learning a lot. I was like spending a lot of time learning and like improving like technically, but like partnered with a lot of other interesting, I think, creatives and people that I think I just like aimed to like surround myself by, like, which is with good people and like good energy. And that eventually got me to Detroit, where the founders of Hobbs, the original founders, Ian and Nick, Ian Sigmund and Nick Forshee, were like, hey, we're doing this new thing. Like, we need some help. Like, come on out. And so I was like, all right, I'll try it. And eventually I like came and stayed, and it was exciting. But I think it was like, you just don't know what's going to come your way. And, you know, like that's life. It just kind of not my intention at all, but here I am.
No, I feel like pretty much everybody in motion has a similar sort of thing where I don't think anybody really set out like, I want to be a motion designer. Maybe up until like more recently, there might be people that are starting to get into that because there's just so many, I say as one of the young kids, but so many darn young kids coming into this industry and finding it online pretty early.
Or like knowing it. Yeah.
Right. But up until then, I mean, we were talking with, oh shoot, who were we talking with? I can't remember. Talking with somebody the other day who we had on the show. No, it was Jorge. That's who it was. We were talking to Jorge, and he was saying that one of the people on their team was a nurse for the longest time and got into motion that way. And I'm like, how do you, like, that crossover is wild. But
yeah,
I think that's what makes motion design so great, is because everybody comes from all these different backgrounds, that there's just like so much creative pull from not necessarily like creative fields, you know?
Yeah.
It's like less of an echo chamber in that way.
In hindsight, I remember I went to an F5 conference in like 2014 or 2015 or something. And one of the speakers was, she was like a microbiologist that learned 3D to visualize the research that she was doing, because otherwise people weren't paying attention. And at the time, I wasn't like that taken away, because I was like, you know, interested in listening to the and food presentation. At the time, it was like G Monk or whoever was there. And I was like, that's, you know, that to me was like the coolest thing. But now looking back, I'm like, she was a genius. Like the fact that she had like such a deep knowledge of a technical world and learned ours to apply it and make her stuff better was so much more interesting to me now than I really appreciated at the moment. Because it's like you said, like people are creative outside of motion, obviously, in design world, but like to walk in, harness it, and walk out is like such a badass move.
Right?
I'm like, what?
It's just like, I'm taking this, it's mine, I'm gonna use it how I want, and being able to view it through that different lens is so interesting.
And also unbiased by like the world of like, sometimes you can feel like you're designing for designers. So she was like, no, this is like needs to be deeply functional and communicate so that research can continue. I was like, whoa.
That's so cool. Shit, that would have been a fun talk.
Wow.
Yeah. But again, yeah, that's life. It's like I don't know. I've had a good time, I think, growing and learning and seeing, like you said, like how people are like come in and out. Another good story is Ian told me this when I moved here, that one time they were working, they kind of saw this guy like, starting to like look in the windows, and it's Detroit, so you kind of like get your guard up a little bit.
Yeah.
And it was a cop, and he was just looking around, and they're like, "Oh, can we help you?" And he's like, "Yeah, are you guys an animation studio? I've been trying to learn animation. Like, do you guys, can I come like hang out in my off time?" And this guy ended up picking up, this is actually crazy because back in New York at my first job at Be Real, they were working on like a Google Earth animation tool called Google Earth Studio. And it's like After Effects for like animating camera of like all the Google Earth stuff.
I was trying so hard to get on the wait list for that in high school, dude.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
so turns out he had been using it to animate cameras for like recreations of crime scenes and for like the briefings at the police station or whatever. Like, and that connection that just blew my mind, that like this, like here I'm in Detroit, this guy comes knocking, he's using the software that like I saw being developed, and he's just like interested. And like you said, like could be a nurse, could be a cop, could be whoever. And it's like, like just comes knocking. It's like, what is this? This is interesting. Like, this looks fun. That's
wild.
pretty unexpected. You just never know.
His briefs were just so interesting. He is the reason that they look like that on TV. They look all
Yeah, I know, maybe. And I mean, I don't know. I always felt like I was on the sharpest tool in the shed. So like finding something where like I could problem solve or like technically get involved was also like really fun for me, because I always liked puzzles and math and things like that, but not to the level where I would be like the go-to, god tier like programmer or whatever, but like tinkering around and like, I don't know. I think that's why also motion is like interesting, because there's always, just technically, like from a workflow perspective, is just like there's always something interesting to learn. Completely artful as well, but I kind of always liked like, here's a cool style frame, make it move. And it's like, well, okay,
Right? It's like, all right, I'll test this out. We'll figure it
Yeah.
out. We'll get there.
How much does that show up in your daily workflow? I know that you guys do a lot of like more technical problem solving, especially with like the drone project that you had.
Yeah. So I guess for anyone wondering what Hobbs is or what it does, because it can be a little hard to figure out from the outside. So we're a motion design studio, but we focus primarily on UI UX problems and briefs and digital products. So a lot of times we're working with larger tech companies on internal problem solving, or creating like motion design or visual design systems for them. A lot of times it essentially works out as a tool or something, or some kind of guidelines that they can use to enact then their work. So we're not doing a lot of broadcast flashy TV spots or ads or something really as much as we are ingesting a problem, thinking on it, and sort of like approaching, like giving back, like what's the best way to approach this? Here's some guidelines. A lot of times it comes down to just like, here's like the actual values of these ease curves that you should use, right? So like much like a branding design system, but in the motion world, toolkitting, whatever. But, it could be like doing that through After Effects. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Lottie workflow. A lot of times we're constrained to like, it has to be like go into products. So it has to be like some sort of JSON file, or we've done, custom tools that are like based on Unreal or like an entire Figma workflow. So things that are like, it doesn't matter like what the final solution is. I think like more and more people come back to Hobbs for more of like our approach and our process of like problem solving than necessarily like the flashiest work that's out there right now, which is where I'd like to be, like is more to wrestle with the problem more long term than maybe like a quick turnaround. That being said, everyone in the studio is like geeks out on like, all the Vimeo stuff, all the beautiful work that's out there, and like practice it internally. But I think we want to create a culture about like learning and like problem solving, and almost treat it like a science fair more so than like, just having to execute on a style frame, even though like, we still like love that. So it takes on a pretty like heady, logical step. And you'll see a lot of our work is like pretty refined and looks minimal and everything. And I think that something that doesn't get said enough is like it's not really like because like that's our style. It's as much as it is like that's the constraint. Is like when you work in product, you're fighting developers on like reducing the load of entry of like how heavy is the file that we have to put in there, and like how distracting is it for a user to see 300 times a day. And so it's like crazy because you want to add some nuance and some delight in there, but you don't want to distract somebody and like annoy them with this like blinking dot or whatever it is. So we like ride an interesting line between animation and the UI UX world, which is cool. And it like translates all the way through the drone stuff, which is like, you know, we'll do little icons, but we'll also do like 500-foot drone shows. That's like needed its own, you know, brainstorming of like, how are we going to do that?
Right.
Hard. But yeah, that's kind of what the world is here, I think.
That's very cool. Did Hobbs start off like that?
Yeah. So the origin story of Hobbs was that Ian and Nick, who started Gunner, now Duolingo, had they were doing really well, and a lot of the work was maybe more like character illustration, narrative, very fun, and they started getting some UI UX briefs, and they were killing it. But in order to maintain that workflow, I think they would have needed like perhaps to prioritize different things that they really wanted to. And so it didn't really make sense under the umbrella of Gunner to like maintain that and develop that sort of branch at the time. Because to do what they do best, they like need to remain kind of small and agile, and it just didn't make sense from like a business perspective. So they're like, well, why don't we try starting another thing that's like fully focused on UI UX? And at the time, like 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of shops are doing this kind of work, but sort of like on the side. Whereas Hobbs started as like, this is our bread and butter. Like this will be our corner, and we're gonna like die on this hill. Like this is it. And so that was interesting to a lot of our first clients, because no one was like, this is what we do. So you either had like design shops that were like, oh, we can do the UX UI part, and then maybe hire like an external vendor for the animation, or you had an animation studio that was like, oh, we can do the animation, maybe not the UI UX part, or you had like a agency of sorts that was trying to coordinate all of it as well. But there was nobody saying like, we will do this like through and through, and specifically from an animation lens, like starting point. And so that was fun. And like, so now what we aim to do is a lot of times animation comes last or second. It's like design, animation, sound design. And then you're like, wow. But we try and like bring, like we do our best to try and convince, you know, like our partners to like let us in the conversations way earlier, so that the consideration for animation in a product is like a core moment or part of the design, and not just like an added like layer of decoration. Because then you can say a lot with things moving. Like ultimately, it's like you're communicating. So it just makes everything more seamless. It also like screws us less in the end, because then you get stuff that's like may feel clunky, or you're like trying to figure out clever transitions, but it's not there. And you're like, we're just like trying to force it in. So that's kind of like where we are with a lot of our clients. It's like, let us in earlier. How about that? Like, let's just try. And it's been working.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We also ask people to let us in as early, but more from like a storytelling perspective.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I feel it can be a little bit of a struggle sometimes, but
The constant battle.
boy, is it worth it.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a trust thing too, especially with like recurring clients. But yeah.
John Valuegraph has a question about how much further the drone animation can be pushed. Besides fidelity, do you have any ideas, feasible or not, to push the niche even further than you already have? So if you want to just give some context on that before you jump into that one.
Yeah, so the drone work is, believe it or not, is not as big of a sliver as we would love it to be. But I think the reality is that it's also a seasonal thing. So for us, it's seasonal as well. But like when we're testing stuff, currently, like the number one way to get more to push it is more drones. But it actually gets to a point where like that gets in the way, because they literally get in the way of each other. So you can't be as flexible with it. I would say if you've never seen one, it's a little hard to imagine because it feels very grand. Like it's very unnatural. It's kind of eerie, to be honest, because they're so still and they're so calculated that you don't have to do much to really feel the presence and the awe of like, well, this thing's giant, but like moving in a synchronized fashion. I actually think that the interesting stuff is in combining other things with drones. So we've talked about lasers. People are already doing fireworks combined with drones. We can control the drones, but I would love to do a synchronized like camera that's like also like controlled so that you could actually plan out a shot. And this currently, if you want to like shoot it from the sky in like a camera drone, you use like a pilot or something like that. But it would be amazing if we could like animate the camera and like get that shot back. So doing a lot of stuff that's like post processing or like for video is interesting to me. Yeah, we've taken it pretty far already. So I think what we spend a lot of our time on right now is like making the workflows as seamless as possible and kind of eliminating any redundancies of like that we have to for exporting or for like checking, because we do a lot of stuff manually, and so it's like eliminating that takes like hours out of the equation so that we can focus on the actual scenes and like the formations that happen and the creative transitions and things like that. But when you're limited by the speed, you kind of just need to lean into it and be like, well, if the thing's going to be up there for a minute, like make it the coolest, like bear that you can and give it like foreshortened, moments. And even just right there, how it's like occluding itself. Like when you're on the ground, like it feels like, whoa, this thing's like disappearing like behind the nose. So stuff like that, I think is like, it's simple, but effective. So I think it's over time we've just gotten better, but yeah, you guys should definitely go see one. I mean, someday.
I think I have. I was at
now I'm
music
jealous.
festival and I turned around and there were these spinning lights, and I was like, I think I know who did that.
There's quite a few. There's like starting to pop up like competitors, but I would say that the company we work with, Firefly, has the strongest visuals, and not just because it's us, but I think it's because they hire an external creative team for it,
right?
And so we'll craft like entire custom shows or formations with them, and it's like it becomes it's like really rad. And we've done some weird stuff, like we did like a lip syncing music video once.
Oh, that's cool.
A fun of so like stuff like that.
Where can I go see them then?
Well, come to Detroit. They test just by the highway, like it's like a half hour away from the studio, and people often are like pulling off to the side of the road. The cops get called. The news has been in to like report on it, because it's just like you'll be driving, they'll like be doing some giant thing. You're like, what is like? It looks weird. It's like alien.
Yeah, you at least get one Reddit post on some conspiracy theory or something being like,
people,
it's happening.
People often think it's real. It's like fake, which is funny. Yeah,
little lights, guys. That's very cool.
But it's cool. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There's so much to do, like so much to see with the drones. Like you can't just like do a formation. You're just inclined to keep playing with it because it's so bizarre. Yeah. You're like, what is this? Like, what can we do? Oh, and this is like, at one point they could only do lighting that was like 6 frames per second. So it felt really slow. And they like upped their firmware because they're all custom. The company makes them all custom.
Yeah.
Like everything. And they suddenly had 24 frames per second. Lighting, and so it doesn't matter how slow it is, you can just pump visuals through it, or like lighting, and it's so cool. Like that's where it gets exciting for us, is just like pumping a bunch of stuff through it. It's fun.
Cool.
I mean, it's just such a
right now
cool medium to work with, I mean, let alone when we started to get to do some work for events and things, being able to see something on a giant screen, it's got to be tenfold when it's this gigantic thing in the sky that's also in 3D space and whatever. Like, yeah. I mean, I'm sure they've got some sort of like dampening blades or whatever, but I'm assuming there's also some limitation of the amount of drones, not just from a not wanting them to run into each other standpoint, but also just like the sheer noise that all those bands would make.
Yeah, that's the part. That's the part of the eeriness is that there's this buzzing in the air, and you're just like, whoa, like they're here. Like you can't. Like it's a little. That's what I'm saying. Like so, they try to drown it out too with like paired music. So,
Right.
and you're usually pretty far at the test field. You're right there. Like even the shot here, like we're maybe like 150 feet away, and like you can hear them loud. But usually an audience will be closer to 300 to 500 feet away. Legally, like there's certain standards or whatever.
I see.
Obviously, with music festivals, maybe it's different, but like for the most part, they try and be like quite far. You don't have to be that close to appreciate them,
Right.
But when you're right underneath it, it's like spooky.
I imagine that's also
Like,
part of the thing to have to figure out. Like, if you've got a particular shot that would almost work better in 2D, like that bear, for example, I'm assuming it's helpful for it to be kind of far away because that way people aren't seeing like how it's unintended to be seen. You know?
Kinda. You're definitely right. I mean, it's so big that it's like does it super matter? Like, but so if you do a 3-dimensional turn, the outermost drones are going to have to be moving beyond their speed limit or beyond their legal speed limits because they can go up to like 60 miles per hour or more. But I think 15 is like the max right now for the size of shows that we're doing.
Right.
So what you do is you animate everything in 3D and then you just squash it. And then we have a way of doing that so that like the perspective shift, like the parallax is correct, but they're actually moving much, much slower. And that way, and some of like that would have been closer to the middle are like hardly moving. So that's when you just see it and you're just like, and we test everything from like eye level too, is like it doesn't matter. Like you don't know that they're 3-dimensional or not,
right.
because even if they're far away, like they're so bright and it's light that you wouldn't even know
it's hard
that
to
they're
tell
like that much further. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that's like the kind of thing that you don't realize and you wouldn't even know. Like it's like interesting, but like not to anybody watching it. But you'll like go and test something and be like, oh, that's interesting. What if we tried this? So like it's always been like we'll go up every maybe like every other month at this point.
Yeah.
If that. But you'll get excited because like you know that you tried something new in this new show or in this new formation. You just want to go and like see like did it work? Like can I trick my own eyes? So stuff like that is interesting. But again, most of it is now just like making our internal workflow like as fast as possible so that the bringing someone on board to help out or that wants to learn to animate drones is like it used to be like a pain, like months of like training and just getting to know the system out of like safety concerns. And now it's like, oh, plug and play. Like I animated this thing and we can populate it and we can do a couple checks and then send it over. And now they have like their own way of checking stuff before they fly it. So it's like, there's so much more infrastructure that's like, it takes the pressure off. Like, if you guys were like, I want to make something. Oh, okay. Like no biggie. So stuff like that's nice.
That's cool, man.
That's fantastic.
Jeez.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm definitely coming to Detroit now.
Yeah.
This is a done deal. I'm
Do
gonna
it.
Do it. That sounds like a lot of problem solving went into that kind of project. You guys do a lot of problem solving, clearly. Do you guys have any like specific ways that you start exploring how to solve problems? I mean, I'm sure that the actual problems themselves vary quite a bit. Do you have any structures or frameworks that you use to kind of get into it?
Good question. For the most part, yes, but also no. Like every project is pretty different. And I think what it requires for it to be successful is different. So there's maybe like a range of deliverables where it's like it could be us coming back with like say client was like trying to figure out what does their like motion language look like for a particular product, and maybe it's not the most exciting product, but they want to get into that world. And so most of the time our first step is like really getting to know what the product is about, what it does, who are the people making it, who are the internal stakeholders that are going to approve this. Like it actually starts with a lot of background of like who's looking at this stuff, who's going to approve it, like what do they actually need, are they asking the right questions, what questions can we ask, and doing like our which everyone I think should do and probably does, is like just getting like a really strong grasp of like what sometimes they may not even be asking for the right thing, And a really simple example might be like knocking on a door and be like, we need this thing. Like, you should just get a freelancer. Like, we're too expensive to, like, you don't want to hire a studio for this. Like, that's like a, base level example of that. But much deeper would be like, we think we need an entire motion design system. It's like, no, you don't. You maybe need like a 0.5 version of that, but like you actually have like all the workings here. Like we can work on this together. So that's a big step, is just kind of like your homework. And then we try and fight for like as much time and exploration as possible, because I think it's easy to decide early in a project, like, okay, here's the concept and here are the constraints and here's like, we're only going to do this. And we see like, but you could like make all these rules for yourself and for your project and get to the end and it could look bad. And you're like, well, we followed all our rules. And it's like, yeah, but you didn't know what you were going to make. So it's like, you have to give yourself like visual creation exploration moment to figure out like, okay, that's working. Why is it working? That's also working. Is it working better? Like, do they go together? Do we have to pick one? And over time, find the rules, like find the things that make sense. And then kind of like work in tangent with like your concept or your direction or your deliverable to say like, this is starting to come together. Obviously you should have some direction, but not, I think we're like, it's discovery, right? It's like almost like scientific, like, let's try this. Did it work? Why or why not? Okay, do it again. Did this work? Yes. Why or why not? Whatever. And so in that way, the process is like the end product is like a product of the process and not something that you're like, I know what I want to make, which is I do all the time. Like, you tell me a problem, like, I know what I'm going to make. But I also know that that's my very first idea. And my first 10 obvious ideas are like, I may come back to those, but let's get all those out. Then let's do 20 more. And those are going to be bad because I'm just going to be grasping at straws. And then after that, after like the 30th and the 50th, you're like, oh, now I'm like thinking out of the box, because now I'm asking questions that weren't so obvious. So with that ample time, now it's really hard to fight for that time, because the reality is people don't want to pay for it and they have budgets and timelines, and I get that. But in a dream scenario, you have that time to really exercise options so you can come back stronger to your client and be like, it's not even that this is great for you, it's that we tried all this other stuff and we know for a fact that this is like a good, like, strong foundation. Because there's hundreds of ways to answer a brief, but you want to be confident, so they're confident, and that way you like gain that trust. And it's like, okay, also now let us like talk to your developers, because we've definitely had projects where we get to that point, we're excited, they're excited, we never see it again, and then we see it in product and it's like not good. Like, it's just, because no one like saw it through.
Yeah.
Because again, in our world, it's not just, you don't just deliver like a video file. It's like you deliver like a guideline and like ways that things should move and ways that, because you know what I mean? It's like, like, let us do it. Like, let us like be in there.
Like, you guys paid for this. Don't you want to make sure it's actually deployed properly?
Yeah. Yeah. Because in UX, like you're not just doing like a linear thing. You're like, it's reactive and interactive. And so say you're working on like a digital assistant, like a Google Assistant or something. Like, we've done a few of those, and conversations, like, they either stop or they end or they redirect, or there's like a moment where it needs to think, or you might lose Wi-Fi. So all these little like states of happening, it's almost like designing a video game, because like it could go, there's an infinite tree of options and they all kind of interconnect. So you kind of plan for that.
Mm-hmm.
So if the person implementing is not aware of the little like nuances of that, it just looks clunky, and you're like, "Who made this? Hobbs? No,
How could they do
it wasn't
this?
us. It wasn't us." So that's kind of where you're like, that's sort of like, so it's like your homework, your exploration, and then like the implementation is like the process. I think, like, broad strokes,
Right?
However big or however small is kind of like how I like to think about it. Anyway, it's not always that perfect, but
That's understandable.
yeah.
We've got 2 questions in the chat. One a little bit more specific and one more nebulous. Jacob says, do you also use Rive at Hobbs? I know you were talking about Lottie earlier, but I know lots of folks are starting to use that.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I think workflow stuff is interesting to me these days. So Rive is definitely something we're like poking at more seriously these days. It used to be known as Flutter. There was another one, I think. And so we've had some projects come in that like, we're basically asking, at the time it was like, hey, turn this After Effects file into a Rive file. It's like, okay.
Right.
But now it's like, do it in Rive. And so we're playing with it. I think it's got like interesting potential, but maybe a little early stages. But like I know that there's plans to do some interesting things, and they're trying to move into, I think, like they just dropped like this like video game demo.
Yeah.
So they're trying to move into like the game space. I think like, I mean, it's built for like live real time sort of ideas. So, and I think in general, real time stuff is dope. I think that's definitely the future for motion.
They've got it plugged into, it's not Unreal, but it was some other game engine that they're integrating it with. I can't remember what it was, though.
Unity, maybe?
Could be. I don't remember.
Unreal is crazy right now.
Unreal's Unreal.
That blows my mind.
John asks, as a creative director, have you had to face the challenge or dynamic of less time in software designing and animating? You often see that as people progress upwards, they spend less and less time designing.
Well, maybe not designing. I mean, yes. Okay. Short answer, yes. I miss being in the trenches. I miss being like the go-to like After Effects, like figure it out guy. But my time is better spent and better served elsewhere. And I think that's the reality you come to, is like, I'm actually slowing down the process by wanting to like get in there.
Right.
So you really have to choose your battles. Like, as much as I know I can do the thing, it's more worth my time to show somebody that, or like give my perspective, or just kind of like, hey, maybe try it like this, or, you know, whatever, like then actually being the person there. Because I got clients to do and projects to check in on, things like that. So if my day looks like, even if it was like a third of the day was meetings, that is like the half hour before every meeting is like broken up, or like trying to get back in the zone is like broken up, because you get fast once you're like in there and you're in the flow. But like getting in the flow is hard when you're like getting pulled out to like be asked a question or something. So it just becomes a matter of like time management. But in my off time, like when it's just me, I'm like, yeah, like I want to do stuff. And it's fast. I keep it short because like I get my fix and then I get out. Because otherwise it's like I wouldn't be as an effective director if I was like in there all the time.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's the reality. But I miss it. Like I still like it. So I don't know. It also like pumps me up for like when I see someone doing something interesting. It's like, that's cool. How did you do that? Like, don't think that's not cool, because that's pretty dumb. Like, like it kind of helps me celebrate those wins that I see around. I'm like, how did you do that? And like people get excited. So like, I always found it interesting when I worked with directors that like came from this world. And there's different backgrounds, different stories, but like someone that really understands like what you're going for, like also can trust that you're what you're talking about. And so I hope that I give off that sense and that vibe, because that got me pumped about like continuing to like learn and try things and explore things and not be scared of like, I guess I gotta learn Blender now. It's like, yeah, like sure, like let's do it. You know, because I'd be like gung-ho about it for sure. But yeah, the reality is you're not in the trenches as much. But so you gotta like fight your battles there.
Yeah.
Be realistic.
I feel that so very much. Austin, do you want to go ask a little Q or two?
I think it's time for a crit.
Oh, I think you might be right.
It might be time for a crit.
Let's see if I remember where my sunglasses are.
If you don't, I'll be partying on my own. Don't you worry. All right.
I do.
Voila.
That's fantastic news.
We have a submission today from Hussein Anwar, just called Focus, posted 4 days ago. This is brand new, hot off the presses.
Crazy.
Right, here we go.
Crazy talk right here. Oh my lord.
Oh, that's cool. Nice.
All right, I'll keep it
One more
real low
time.
and just kind of let it roll on through, and we can talk through it.
You've got some really interesting and cool design and stylation happening. Stylation. I don't know. That's
It's a new word.
Stylation.
New word. Don't worry.
New word, stylation. Some of the motion does not fit how much time you put into some of the design. At least that's what it feels like to me.
Do you have a specific spot in mind when you're thinking of that?
I have a couple spots in mind. One, when it first starts zooming in to the first wow moment. A lot of the ball movements don't feel.
Feels very stuttery, you know?
Like, okay, this is interesting. The eye just kind of pops in. Yeah, that could be more of a wow moment, I think.
Yeah, I want to like fly through it, like the frames like coming faster or something, like fly by the camera. Like,
right.
Yeah.
it feels really grand, but like a little visual texture of like just a speed ramp there would make it feel like we're like really falling in there.
Yeah.
It's right here, yeah, just
because it
kind
kind
of back.
And I mean, I know if you're just working with scale on a shape, you eventually get to that point where it only scales up so much after that, you know, and so your easing doesn't really quite.
But you got
do what you want.
You gotta do the exponential scale, where like it changes the way it scales the layer, right. And then it's like it really blows up past your camera. Or you could just like 3D layers too. You could try that if you're comfortable with that. Or it's just sweet though.
Put a ton of nulls together and just keep scale on scale on scale.
You could do that. You know what? This is really beautiful, and also like I don't know if I could design quite like this was never my cup of tea, so kudos. But there was two moments. One is the bouncing ball at the very beginning, like right here. That felt like it like sticky to the ground plane, and like I think if you just like even if we like if you were to like just rework that, like it would just carry like the quality of the piece through, because I think that moment kind of, even though it's so early, kind of took me out of it, and like knowing what's coming, I'm like, oh man, I wish like I hadn't wasn't still thinking about that.
Right.
And then the scaling would be cool. And then the last one, and this is like now I'm realizing, is right here there's like this cool mandala thing. We have these drop shadows and they're nowhere else. And because these little like the little rings and the little like tick marks are like kind of after this with like the the compass.
Oh, with like the bevel and emboss going on.
Yeah, there's like a bevel, and I think it's particularly the blacks, because everything else is so soft, and so it really, I can just really sense it, and it feels kind of like everything is like soft and gradient and beautiful, but this is like sharp. There's like sharpness there, and that also like this could the innermost rings, the way that it's soft there, I think would be like better than the sharpness, because everything else feels like so smooth and round. And this is just kind of like takes you out of it a little bit again.
I think that consistency is key.
The lighting,
I think I can.
And the lighting in some of these other scenes is more consistent too. Whereas this, like, the highlights are implying that like the light is up above, but the glow is like from the center, you know, which is making it kind of like we can almost see each object too well. You know?
Yeah. They're very well defined, and I think that's the thing where everything else feels much more cohesive.
Right.
Which is really nice. I mean, it's cool. I think it's just it's the things that like kind of take you out of it for a moment is like really the general note. It's like there's like a little sharpness or a little like catches your eye when it shouldn't, so that it feels like a seamless like transitional, because that's what you're doing. There's no cut, so you're like taking us through the journey, and like when it takes you out, you're like, oh man,
you're like, where did I go?
I think this is a piece of advice I give to a lot of people who are kind of just starting out, is like you need to push yourself to exaggerate like the motions and the style and kind of take it as far as you can, so that you kind of know what is too far. If we watch that first little bouncing ball section again, it feels like sticky, and then there are certain things like these little things falling down. They're so small on the screen. These eyes are so small on the screen. Like don't be afraid to make these things more prominent and like a larger part.
That'd be interesting, yeah. Like those bricks that fall, like them being like big, like taller, just to really like feel like you escaped the danger. It's sweet though. By the way, that highlight on the bell at the beginning is dope, where like the ball goes above it. That's pretty fun. Like
that's really cool. That's
I want to see more of that too.
Like, keep it on the frame to do that too. It was such a cool moment.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Noah.
Keep that more on the screen because that's pretty sweet.
I think it's a lot of people will stray towards using iconography or those sorts of things when they're starting to make explainer videos and those sorts of things. But it can help to, I think what Noah's saying with this exaggeration is like make it feel like there's more of a world beyond the canvas bounds, you know? You don't necessarily need to see like each object for what it is within a very like safe margin. You could have things be large and grand and go off screen and sort of mess up your composition a little bit more. It will feel a little more organic and more like integrated in the design rather than being able to pick out like each individual element.
Yeah. One other cool thing though that this is doing is and I don't know where like the sound came from or it was composed for it, but I think it was like it's synchronized well with the sound. And because it's so like frilly and light and floaty and lovely, and there's like this like reverb on it, where like just like the no note is just kind of dying, like kind of lingering around. I think it fits really well with like the overall treatment, but it's just like give me more. This is sweet. That's dope.
Yeah, push it further.
Oh yeah, I just want to dive in there. Like just give me more. Like right. That's sweet though.
Cool.
That's pretty sweet.
Boom roasted. Cool. There it is. Hope that was helpful.
There you go.
All right. And on that note, shall we get to some recs, or do you have a cue in the chat that you've spotted?
I have not spotted. I was looking at the thing too much. Let's go for a little rec.
All right. Here's my rec for the day. I mean, you guys put this out a while ago, the Opal case study, but it's just so clean and happy.
Oh, that's so clean. It's gonna be good.
So smooth and just
it's just so yummy.
Feels great.
Yeah, it's a lot of like hold.
But also the sound, it's like if you took, I don't know, it gives you the vibes of if you took the Wii and made it like 2050, you know?
Who did the sound on this? Do you remember?
Is it Ambrose or is it?
No, this one wasn't Ambrose. This one was I think maybe the credits are at the bottom.
Is it Chicken Sound? No.
No, they're not. Oh man, that's a bummer. They should be. I can find out because they did a great job. Sorry, this was a few years ago, so I'm kind of like forgetting.
You're
at the time, I was kind of newish to Hobbs too when this was being made. So like their sound partners, I was like just meeting for the first time.
Yeah.
But which by the way is a cool thing about Detroit. Like there's always someone around here doing the thing that you need, which is unexpected but lovely.
That's pretty sweet.
But I have to give like a big shout out to Dan Stack. So he was the lead animator designer on this, and Opal itself it's an animated icon set that's a website you can visit. I think it's opal.org, and so every animation is one of these Lottie JSON files, and you can like customize them and download them and use them, whatever, like free, whatever, use them. But it was because at the time we were doing the Lottie thing, and it was like we realized like, oh wait, when you like kick this out, it's still code. Like you can still mess with it. So at the time they were like going to these like insane JSON files and trying to find the strings where you could change the color or the timing or the stroke, because like those values are embedded in the file. So when they realized that, they were like, well, how do we like, what do we do with this information, right? And so that's where like Opal came from. It's kind of the manifestation of like playing in that space and realizing like, oh, it's not done once you hit render. Like it's still live. So that's kind of interesting. But the video itself is really like an interesting challenge because it was one of the first like Hobbs case study internal project videos. So like, well, what does it feel like? Like, and the sound was the big thing. Like we've always spent a lot of time on getting the sound right for things that like, what does Hobbs sound like?
Yeah.
And it's somewhere along the lines of it's like pensive and it wants to feel creative, but also like kind of computery and just like beeps and boops that are not like classic beeps and boops. So like what does that mean? I don't know.
Happy and chimey.
Yeah, happy, like
smooth.
Yeah. Also not dark and whatever, like ominous. But
right.
And also too flexing, I think, more pseudo narrative style. You're like an explainer essentially in the case study video, but like also that smoothness, like where nothing ever is still and like everything's kind of in this like orchestral like limbo. I think that's just kind of indicative of the way that I think like our treatment of things, because our goal is not to just hit you in the face with like a million things, but like kind of like lead your eye and like make it floaty and kind of build a world around it. I think we just kind of gravitate to that. But yeah, that's Opal. It's cool. It's interesting. I'm like excited for, the drone stuff is like similar headspace, but in a different world. And I think we've like, that's sort of like internally, like the kinds of projects that we like.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we all do too. So
yeah,
they better keep them coming.
Yeah.
And then Nevin coming in the chat saying Christopher Smith did the audio for the Opal.
Christopher Smith, thank you.
Yeah,
he did a great job. Working with sound designers is fun, and I've learned a lot about how to communicate with them.
I was gonna say, I feel like I'm giving the equivalent of the make it pop and sizzle like half the time when I'm giving direction on audio stuff.
Make it pop and sizzle, yeah. Yeah, it's hard though because like I'm a visual learner. Like a lot of animators are like also musically talented. I'm not. So like for me, it's like this is hard. So building a library of reference for myself to pinpoint and be like that, like this, like that part I like. I don't know why I like it, but like this sounds good to me, and I'm trying to tell you why. And so we make sure to like create a sound brief whenever we have a piece that we like that's detailed and has reference and keywords and tones and moods and things, and like hopefully it's the equivalent of being like, yo, make that animation go like you just kind of start saying and making up things. But if the person on the other side starts to be like, yeah, like this, and they're like, yeah, and like then
you make that's common language a little bit.
Yeah, you just kind of make your own world up, and it's like, okay, I'll meet you there. So yeah, sound is dope.
Sound is dope. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
Changing the title really quick to just sound is dope.
We're just about out of time, but of course I have one last question that I love to ask everyone. So I'm gonna throw it there. Unless Austin, unless you want to ask another one real quick first.
Let me scan chat real quick and see if there's here's a fun one that hopefully is a quick answer. John says, "What is your favorite piece from another studio?"
That's a quick one. You gotta
have one off the top of your head. Something came to mind.
Rare Volume. So they just redid their site. I was looking in there, and they have a research page, and they have a project called Meander, and it's like an R&D project they did that I saw recently. It's the second one down, and they just developed this visualization in Houdini for creating procedural rivers. And then what happens whenever like water like freezes in the winters and then it melts in the summers, it changes the river shape. I think this is just like a thing. But I don't know. I just saw this the other day, and I was just like, it's also really good. It's like long. This is like a long case study, and they like really I just like was captivated. I just found myself like coming back to this the whole day, and just spending time just like appreciating what it is. It's just interesting.
So well
it's just
thought through.
It's just cool.
So pretty.
I mean, it's so cool to see older maps like these mixed with like, I mean, this looks like something that could have come out of that David Blaine piece from Buck. That cell like animated piece.
Oh, like yeah. If you were like cropping it, but if you like just keep scrolling down and then they like start to show process and stuff, and like, so I don't know. It just like had like equal parts like nerding over the Houdini, and then the geological component and like whatever. Like it was just I just found myself here for a while because it was pretty to look at, but it also had like very simple, like, oh, I see what, like I can see the process. And so I was just kind of here for a while. I mean, there's a million answers to that question, but like recently I was like, whoa, this is freaking cool.
Is that really how rivers be moving? That's crazy.
Yeah, it's like water like freezes and unfreezes like throughout the years. It just changes.
Like, never mind about that bend.
Yeah, like you'll see like that river, like yeah, if you look at like maps and stuff, like rivers and water, whatever. But I don't know. It's just cool. It's procedural, generative stuff that feels applicable is like exciting to me beyond just being generative.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I think if I had a clone, I would have him learn Houdini because I think it's like awesome, but it's like real. That's just a deep well.
It's a whole other beast.
That's
conquer, you know.
So
that's wild. What a wreck. That's my wreck.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a bookmark for me. I like it.
All right, Noah. Final boss question.
All right, final boss question. Are you ready?
Yeah,
that's the question. There it is. That's done. That's done.
That's a good one.
So, what's one piece of advice that you could give to your younger self?
I really enjoyed learning, and I always thought that my technical skill set would be like the thing, like, or my interest in God, I can figure that out. But honestly, like not even a shortcut, but like a really helpful thing is the networking aspect. That's like not being scared or nervous of reaching out and connecting with not even like your heroes, but just people that are like interesting to you. Because the worst that can happen is they don't respond. And it's like, okay. But in general, the motion community is pretty open and like helpful. And it's always been said, like, when you're looking for a job, you won't find one, but you'll find jobs when you're not looking for them. And that comes from people just getting to know you. And like, it's not even that they're like a champion for you and they're like, yeah, like Eddy's going to kill it. But it's just like, if you're just in constant contact with those people and you just reach out, that the first moment that they're like, yo, do you know somebody? They're just going to be like, oh yeah, like Eddy or Austin or whoever, like, because you're just top of mind. You're like, you're more available to them just socially. And so it's that easy. And I think I always shied away from that because I was like, oh, like I feel pretty good at my skills. And like, I don't think I was arrogant, but I was just kind of like, I think I could do this. Like, I don't know if I want to bother anybody or like whatever. Like, I won't go up. But like, it took me a while to get over that and then just be like, hey, what's up? I'm Eddy. Like, I've known about you for a while. And it's like, oh, cool. Like, I actually happen to know we have mutual friends. Okay. And so like, you can make a connection fairly quickly without having to be, because once you get desperate and you're like, I need a job or like, look at my stuff. It's like, you're like, cool. Like, you're competing now with thousands of people that also have reels versus a connection that feels more genuine or interesting, or someone that can sense that you're like, just interested and engaged and eager, like beyond just like hire me. And you're like, because then it gets weird. You're like, okay, like
you're just like, here's my wall. See that? All right.
Yeah, exactly. Versus just being like, oh, hey, like we caught up, or I sent you an email, whatever. And
right.
Not everything is promising, but like, I don't know. I think like
before you need something from them.
Right. Seriously. Yeah. And not being scared, because like it also, people like to see like even young or older people that are like just still interested and want to like ask questions and are not just interested, just don't just want a job or like hire me at this cool studio. Like, there's a lot of studios doing other cool stuff. You just see like the flashy stuff, but the truth is like everyone's doing like the pay the bills work. Right. So it's like you could be the one at a different studio doing the cool stuff. So it's like, I don't know, like it's all interesting, I guess. That's life. I don't know.
That's life.
That's life.
That's good advice to younger Eddy.
I agree with that. It's so much fun to just reach out to people and just make those connections. Be interesting and interested, and shit will happen.
I think be interested is more. You don't need like, I don't know. It's not that. It's just animation.
It's just not that deep, really.
It's
You know?
not. It's not. Enjoy yourself. People will see that and they'll want. That's it's contagious, is what I want to say. It's contagious. Like when people are like interested and passionate and like they want that in their studios too. So that's more attractive than just like, hey, new
Look at
reel.
this thing I made.
Although do that. Also market yourself, but like, you guys know what I'm trying to say.
But like do it in a kind of fun way, kind of fun, kind of sexy way.
Do it in a you way. You know?
Yeah, be fun and quirky,
Be fun and quirky.
Just be fun and quirky.
There you go.
Just kidding.
Well, with that wonderful advice, that is the show. Eddie, do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, check us out. Follow us on Instagram. We don't always post a lot, but we have a lot of stuff coming down. Product work takes a long time to come out, so sometimes we can't show it for a minute, or be in Detroit and hit us up. If you're ever in Detroit or close to it, just say, hey, like you can come by and check out the studio and we can chat or something. So it's a good time.
Oh yeah.
Just say you're a cop and you just might become an animator.
Do it. Yeah. You do. I mean, yeah.
They're like, wait, we've heard this one before.
It's happened. You don't have to work in a studio to be an animator, so you can just be one.
Do it. Be animators, y'all. Do this thing.
What are you waiting for?
Cool. All right. Well, then on that note, if you want to get your work critiqued like we did today, link in the description to the Google form to fill that out. Discord down in the description as well. Use hashtag Daily Emotion Show when you post on socials, and we just might wreck it. We'll see y'all